Hi, this is debosmita and I warmly welcome you back to my channel. I'm no subject expert, but as someone who has very recently appeared for her class 10 board and has scored decent marks, and I mean 98 is a decent score, right? That too in English language. I believe that I'm here with my first-hand experience and my very intact memories of the way how I prepared myself, the mistakes I made, way how I eventually rectified them. Let us begin without further ado. The format of the question paper is not much different from what it was during our time. Like the first question you have is of your composition part. Let me go one by one. First, the story. Your story should have concrete plot, structured characters, and it should have a proper ending. Don't keep your story an open-ended story. If the title is provided, make sure that you do justice to your title. And if the topic is provided, don't just jump into giving a title to your story straight away. Write the story, and after you are done with writing it and you have given your story a proper conclusion, like all the characters have a proper structure, like they had some role to play. Like it's not that you introduced a character in the beginning and then you nowhere did mention that character all throughout. Like in many cases the characters will be mentioned in the topic itself, like I have seen in this year's specimen question paper that was released by CISE. So yeah, once you are done with the entire story, that is the time when you have to think about giving your story a proper title and do justice to your title. Make sure that your title is self-explanatory enough. Topic should be the central pivot of your story. The question will always ask for an original short story, like not some story which you read somewhere, or some, some movie or some like daily soap you watched somewhere and then you picked up this idea, and that is plagiarism. Make it a short story that is original. In order to make your story seem like more like a story, you can always add a bit of humor to it. Like a bit of humor, a touch of humor is never going to bring you any harm. Your narrative composition is going to be a reflection of the incident that has happened with you. Okay, can I just read out from like the notes that I have just made in my diary? Like, yeah, I think that will be better. Like I might miss out any point in this, in this loop of looking at the screen and looking at my diary. So anyway, your narrative is a reflection of the incident which has happened. Like, do not make it fictitious. Like, even if you put some sort of like fiction in your story, do not do that to your narrative composition, because then what's going to be the difference between your story and your narrative composition, right? And your narrative composition should have your first person account. Reflection upon the incident which is mentioned in the question paper must definitely be included. Then comes the argumentative composition, in which you have to take just one stance. You can either go for it or you can go against it. You cannot take a neutral stance that you are going to balance both the sides. No, you cannot strike a balance between both the sides. Like if you are going for it, you go absolutely positive for the motion, and if you are not, if you are going against it, then don't put any streak of positivity in, like with respect to the motion in your composition. Necessary to mention your stance. Let's take for an example, like peer pressure leads us to feel inferior about ourselves. Okay, I am going for the motion, like for the topic which is given to me, I will mention that I strongly believe that peer pressure is responsible for making a lot of the teenagers feel inferior. When I am putting forward my points, I mean my arguments, my logical arguments, like don't make your arguments illogical. Okay, and make sure that you include at least 5 to 6 points to be on the safer side. And if and only if you are having 5 to 6 logical concrete points in your mind, only then go for the argumentative composition. So in the beginning, I'm mentioning that I firmly believe that yes, peer pressure is responsible for inducing a sense of inferiority among the teenagers. And while I am done with like mentioning 2 or 3 of the points, I'm going to once again mention it. Like, this is another reason why I believe that peer pressure is responsible for, and in the conclusion as well, because it happens many a times that of course the examiners are in a hurry. They have to check like a considerable number of copies every day. So like it might happen that uh, you know in your introduction the examiner has missed out on whatever stance you have taken. So having like repeated your stance in the middle as well as in the conclusion is not only giving like definite like structure to your composition, but also that the examiner is getting reminded that yes, this child has not diverted from his or her like for or against the topic. Yeah, don't make your examiner feel at any point that you are utterly confused about whether you should go for it or whether you should go against it. If you feel that this is going to be very confusing for you and you might not be able to like remain on any one extremity all throughout, then take my advice and don't go for argumentative composition. The safest option which you have is to go for descriptive composition, because I personally always went for descriptive composition, like always. There was I did not even spare a glance at the other topics. I just went for the descriptive composition, no matter whatever the topic was, because most of us are sanguine of the fact we'll be able to describe whatever is given. Okay, of course, using our five senses, not convert it into a story. It's a descriptive composition. Just keep it a composition, not a story composition. And you have to describe all your five senses, even if the question is asking you to describe what you are seeing or what you are hearing or what you are smelling. Make sure that you also inculcate some sense of taste or some sense of touch. Describe an evening um, by the beach. Okay, so the question mentions that you must like write about what you see and what you hear and like how you feel. So you see the sky changing its hues, like you mention all the hues, and you hear the like waves washing the shores, and you hear the gurgle of the raging waves, like you can hear them raging. Very tranquil while you are sitting there, you feel at solace. Okay, you have not felt this soothing before, like, but make sure that you include some taste, like I could taste the salt air, or mention something about your tactile experience. Picked up the sand, and then you felt that the sand was sipping away from your hand, just like time is sipping away. Picture best. Some people just go on describing what they see in the picture. Either supposed to write a story, fabricate a story, or to write a description, a descriptive composition based on what is given in the image. Now this can be interpreted in several ways, and I don't think there is any particular marking scheme for this particular like type of composition. But as I always say, just to be on the safer side and be in your comfort zone, like no need to go for your out of your comfort zone, no need to take the risk, the unnecessary risk for absolutely no reason. So you just go for the descriptive composition, because like for all the other types of composition you are ticking off some particular criteria, but for this particular composition you are not having any criteria. So it to a huge extent is depending on your examiner's point of view, your examiner's perspective as well. It might happen that his or her viewpoint is not matching with yours. So in that case there might be a contradiction of views, and like I don't know the consequences, because I never pushed myself into this sort of an incident. But anyway, so okay, general pointers. Your vocabulary is going to come into use a lot. Okay, it is going to add a lot of value to your writing. Use synonyms, but judiciously. Do not use bombastic words. Like I have seen like many people using bombastic words whose meanings they don't even know, but they're just using it because it sounds good to them, or like maybe they feel that the examiner is not going to know the meaning of this, he or she is not going to look up the glossary, so I can just use it, it's going to add some value. No, adding like that kind of value is actually not adding any value to your composition. And if the best thing to go about with the composition is to keep your writing very simple. Do not add up too many sentences within one sentence. Like divide your sentences, divide your points. Like sentences should be grammatically correct and free from any kind of spelling error. And use connectors like however, nevertheless, perhaps, etc. Like that makes it seem like a more realistic composition in my opinion. And last but not the least, do not exceed the word limit. Try not to exceed the word limit. I know it is not possible to keep account of how many words you have written so far when you are in the flow of writing, and I don't even encourage you to stop in the middle. So for that reason, I always have followed this mind mapping. Mind mapping is very important. Do the mind mapping before your composition, and in that you firstly like divide your set of ideas into introduction, presentation, and conclusion. So in that way you are already having 3 paragraphs, which is the minimum requirement for your composition. And you can segregate your ideas, like yeah, this idea, this point sounds like it could go with the introduction, along with the introduction of the topic, like this will sound better for the introduction. And always begin your composition with something that is catchy, so that the examiner is hooked to your paper from the very like from the very first moment. And because obviously you are going to start your paper with a composition. And Secondly, like sort out all your points into like introduction, presentation, and conclusion, and that will give you an image of how much, like, what can be the exact word count of your composition after you're done writing it. So it will be a very helpful thing. And if you feel that it might exceed, then you can merge 2 3 points of yours into one single sentence, like shortening it up, abridging it. And yeah, that's all I had to say for your composition part. Now